All right, so this is my last little help video on ionic bonds right before the last polyatomic ionic bond quiz. And one of the first things I noticed that you guys got to realize is you need to use your reference sheet. That reference sheet that I put at the very beginning of this unit, and again at the end if you've gotten to the test, but you haven't, so the very beginning, you need to go to the second to last page, page 7, and find this chart. Because this chart is all the polyatomics that you need. And a polyatomic ion is quite simply an ion that's made up of more than one element. So notice, everyone on here is more than one element. Every capital letter you see is the beginning of a new element. Now, some of them have way more than that, but if it's N and H, that's nitrogen and hydrogen. But in down here, this is NO, that's nitrogen and oxygen. Now, I've seen some people that are writing things like CLO and CL, or C is capital, but L and O are lowercase. So that's incorrect, because this is chlorine, which is Cl, and then a capital O, which is oxygen. Okay, so those are polyatomics. And this chart is pretty much going to tell you everything that you need to know, because it tells you the proper way to write the name in naming it, and it tells you how to write the polyatomic, which you should probably already see, but then up top is the charge. Notice there's only one that's positive, and don't mistake in subscripts for superscripts. So if it's up top, it's a charge. If it's down below, it's the number of atoms. Now, one thing that is important to keep in mind is that little negative being, or negative or positive, that superscript being the charge. So if I was writing ammonium right here like this, I would probably write it a little different, because I would want you to see that that's nitrogen and 4 hydrogen, and I'd put it in parentheses and say that it's +1. Or let's say I was doing nitrate down here, and I was writing that out, I would probably write it as capital N, capital O, 3, because it's 1 nitrogen to 3 oxygen, gives me a -1. But we have to deal with a little chart, and so you just have to read it right. So just a positive means +1, just a negative means -1. It's not the number that's next to it, that's a subscript, it's a number of atoms. Notice if you come down, you get 2 negatives, so like carbonate is -2. And all of these are like sulfate and everything. And if we get all the way to phosphate, it's a -3. So figuring out the charge on here might be a little bit difficult because it's slightly different notation, but it's still the same as it's always been, where if it's up top, it's a superscript, it is a charge, and if it's down below, that number is a subscript, which is the number of atoms. So that should help with most of the identifying of them. Now, let's look into actually making a compound with it. So let's just start with a basic one first. So let's say I have calcium, and I have, let's go with nitrate. We just talked about nitrate. So I'm going to write it just like I said with its notation. That way, calcium, you need to look on the periodic table, and you'll find out it's a +2. So just like before, the cation has to come first. And then we're going to write it out and do the cross-oxidation method almost the identical as the way we've done it in the past. The only big difference is I'm going to keep my polyatomic in parentheses. I do this because I know where to put the subscripts that way. What I mean by that is we're going to do the cross-oxidation like normal, but when I take the 2 from calcium, I'm going to place it outside the parentheses for my nitrate there, because I'm really doubling up all of those molecules. So I'm not just increasing the oxygen that I have 3 of, or the nitrogen that I have 1 of, I'm increasing this entire molecule, this polyatomic ion. I need 2 of these polyatomic ions, so really I need 2 nitrogens and 6 oxygens, which is what happens when you put the subscript outside the parentheses. It's a multiplier in. Now the other one, it drops down just the same as it always did. That 1 is going to come over here to calcium. And again, that doesn't really need to be put there, so we drop the 1 because I wouldn't have written Ca if I didn't have at least 1 calcium. And that's going to be our combination. Now writing the name for it is even easier because we're going to take calcium just like it appears on the periodic table. And after we have calcium, it's not a transition metal, so we don't need to write anything else. All we're going to do is we're going to write nitrate exactly as it appears on the sheet, except in lowercase. So N-I-T-R-A-T-E, calcium nitrate. And now we have both of that done. But you have to follow the previous rules you had. That includes for transition metals. So let's look at one of those. So here I have chromium +4. Chromium could be +4, it could be +2. It has a couple of variations, okay? So you have to be told that one because it's a transition metal. And I have phosphate, which I can look down here is a -3. And so let's go ahead and put it in parentheses and put my -3 there. And then I'm going to do my cross-oxidation method just like normal, where I write them side by side, but I leave that polyatomic in parentheses. Notice that 4 goes with oxygen, not outside the parentheses. And then I'm going to do my cross-oxidation method, that there, to give me a 3 subscript here, a 4 there. It doesn't reduce, so I'm going to rewrite it just so clean it up a little bit. And that is my formula for a transition metal. That's the same as always. But then that chromium, remember I have to follow my transition metal rules. So chromium, which chromium did I use? I used chromium +4. So that's what I have to do in Roman numerals. And then I'm going to write phosphate just like it appears down here. Hopefully I have enough room. Got kind of big handwriting. Phosphate. Okay. And that's the name of it. So it just follows the same rules, and it's super easy to find both the charge and the name of these because it's all off of this little polyatomic ion sheet, which again is on that reference sheet that is on your Canvas module, and it's the second to last page. It has this exact one that I'm using. Hope that helps.